Enzorecto, kalaban ang katiwalian at kasinungalingan, kakampi sa katotohanan at kabutihan.
Ito na naman. Talunan na naman sina Digong ito dahil wala umanong kinikilingan ang dalawang hukom na nais ipa-disqualify ng kampo ni dating Pangulong Rodrigo Duterte kaugnay ng kaso niyang Crimes Against Humanity. Ayon sa plenary ng International Criminal Court, ICC, batay sa buong desisyong inilathala nitong July 3, iginiit ng ICC plenary na sina Judge Rain Adelaide Sophie Alapini Ganso at Judge Maria del Socorro Flores Lira ay kumilos ayon sa kanilang tungkulin sa lahat ng pagkakataon. Samantala, panuorin naman natin ang pahayag ni Attorney Conti kaugnay sa pagsumite ng prosecution ng 11 batches ng ebidensya laban kay Digong.
Does this necessarily point to a full-blown trial, Attorney Conti?
For me, yes.
Why?
We're hopeful that by September, the court will be persuaded to open charges against Duterte, or to open trial rather, to confirm the charges which are actually due to be submitted to the court today and hopefully unsealed so that we, as the public and the victims, can also look at what Duterte is specifically being charged with. The evidence that has been submitted is certainly voluminous. The prosecution submitted up to 11 batches of evidence. And that is more likely to convince the judges who are sitting now in the pretrial chamber 1 to open trial against Duterte.
Let's go into that right now. General disclosure deadline that has come and gone, that was slated to happen July 1, 2025. As you mentioned, 11th tranche of evidence already submitted. And this does not necessarily mean, or does this necessarily mean that this is the last tranche? Because the investigation is still ongoing, Attorney Conti.
There could be additional tranches of evidence required to be transmitted during the trial stage, especially for evidence that is newly discovered or new witnesses who may have come forward during the trial stage. At this point, the transmission of evidence is only as to confirmation of charges hearing, which would meet the quantum of evidence is the reasonable basis to proceed with trial. During trial, the quantum of evidence is this person guilty beyond reasonable doubt? And because of the change in the quantum of evidence, necessarily there will be more evidence to present during trial.
In the history of the ICC, though, Attorney Conti, when you look at the tranches of evidence presented in this stage, how would you position the case of the former president Rodrigo Roa Duterte? Is this voluminous by ICC standards, or is this run of the mill?
Well, we cannot compare exactly one case to another, but what I would like to focus on would be first the volume of evidence that the prosecution has received. As it turns out, it's maybe about half of that evidence. So there are other evidence that the prosecution has not processed, but half of that evidence they have processed and transmitted to the defense. There's a categorization as to the documents that they need to forward or evidence that they need to submit. And there's one category called exculpatory evidence. Of the tranches or batches of evidence that have been submitted, there were only 4 sets of evidence that were termed as exculpatory. And out of so many tranches of evidence, then obviously, as it seems, the investigation clearly points to the guilt of President Duterte.
There's another update from the ICC, as you know, Attorney Conti, and it's that the defense wants to put their own answer to the interim release, saying that it would like to submit the report coming from the Senate on the former president's arrest. And we all know what happened during the hearing and the result of that hearing. What does this tell you, Attorney Conti?
Well, it tells me that the defense really wants this interim release request, and they're focusing on irregularities in the arrest as basis to support the interim release. if we were to go back to the issue of interim release, actually, the main question is, do you need interim release? And for that, you would need to support your age, your physical condition, your health condition, etc. But with this sort of rehashing of the quote-unquote kidnapping narrative, questioning the legitimacy of the arrest, the defense seems to be arguing the other issue of lack of jurisdiction of the court. And so there seems to be a little bit of melding of the two preliminary issues and at present, that of the interim release, which should just focus on why do I need to be released now, perhaps physical situation, medical conditions. But then the other aspect of permanent release asks for permanent release because the court has no jurisdiction. So there's a little bit of melding, and I think the defense has to focus on its requests at present.
Because the alleged irregularities in the arrest of the former president, to your mind, has nothing to do with why they should ask for an interim release of the former president.
Yeah. In a sense, yes. But, well, the prosecution and the defense actually made an issue of that, because in turn, the prosecution says that this person will not surrender himself voluntarily or come to the court when called after interim release, because he precisely questions the legitimacy of the arrest, the legitimacy of the court. And so the counter argument is, well, it's because you have no jurisdiction. And so goes the problem of, is this a question of interim release or a question of jurisdiction?
All right. The last time we talked, Attorney Conti, I remember you giving me 2 dates. That's July 1st, the deadline of the general disclosure, and then July 4. What's supposed to happen July 4th, Hague time?
The submission of the document containing the charges. In the Philippines, this is kind of the equivalent of the information, or in Filipino, the sakdal. So ito yung nandito kung ano yung kaso mismo. So in the document containing the charges, we're likely seeing a repetition of what was in the warrant of arrest and more. Again, there's a different standard of evidence necessary for the warrant and for the document containing the charges. We see in the DCC, it will be more comprehensive than the warrant. It will talk about Duterte's roles specifically and participation in the crimes.
So that's going to happen midnight tonight?
Well, I don't know if, office there starts at around 3 p.m. Philippine time. So they could be submitting it as early as that, but the upload could be as late as, or maybe as early as 12 midnight, which is about 6 p.m. their time. I'm just also concerned about the most recent pronouncement or issuance from the court that there have been attacks on their website. And as we've seen, there were several documents that were only uploaded or seen now, although they were allegedly transmitted or submitted to the court last week. So they may be having problems with their website.
What would the document containing the charges contain or state that would tell you, Attorney Conti, that this is headed into a full-blown trial, that there will be such by September? Go ahead.
Well, first, in the document containing the charges, there would be the names of witnesses, actually. There could be, it depends on the prosecution, if they would also redact the names of those witnesses. There would be specific allegations as to how Duterte was involved. Of course, for many of us in the Philippines, we kind of know already, but it would be a different thing altogether to see it on paper, how exactly he is involved, what exactly did he do, and who exactly saw what he did. It's also important that we note the incidents that would be indicated in the case. So this has been an issue. If there are 30,000 dead or 12,000 or 7,640 who died in police operations as admitted by the police, it has always been a question of how many should be killed in a charge of crimes against humanity. In the document containing the charges, there could be less number of incidents, but this does not mean that the defense, or rather that the prosecution, is not ready to prove the case. It only means that for this particular emblematic cases, they can show that the killings were widespread and systematic.
Bunyog, bunyog, halikan na kasama ka. Bunyog, kapag buklod ay may pag-asa. Luzon, Visayas, Mindanao, isa ang pananaw. Sa bagong Pilipinas ang bunyog isisigaw. Bunyog.